The training material that you are about to see is intended as a general overview of the subject being presented. This training is not being offered as an in-depth course and may not address all aspects of the subject matter being discussed. Always follow your plant's policies and procedures, which may differ from the video. MTS training videos frequently feature exercise questions designed to test the knowledge and awareness of the employees viewing the training. When the question mark symbol appears in the corner of the screen, you may choose to press pause on your video player and discuss the exercise question.
You have all heard lockout, tagout, tryout before, and most of you understand that it is the process of protecting yourself from hazardous energy while servicing or maintaining equipment. So you would think that there are very few incidents related to the release of hazardous energy. Unfortunately, every year dozens of people are killed and thousands are injured because they did not take the time to protect themselves from hazardous energy. Anytime you perform service or maintenance, access the point of operation, or remove or bypass a guard, all energy sources must be locked out. In our business, it is imperative that you lock out 100% of the time and never take a shortcut. It could save your life. This training will outline the important elements of a lockout, tagout, tryout program. Employees involved in a lockout procedure are either authorized employees or affected employees. An authorized employee is anyone who is authorized to shut down, lock out, and try out equipment in order to perform service or maintenance. An affected employee is anyone else in the area who either operates or who works near the equipment where the lockout is being performed. To assure lockout, tagout, tryout is performed correctly, each of the following steps must be completed during every lockout. Notify all affected employees. Review the energy control procedures. Identify all energy sources. Shut down the equipment. Disconnect the power. Apply lock to the energy isolating device. Neutralize potential or stored energy. And try out the equipment. The first step in lockout, tagout, tryout is to notify all employees and contractors affected by the lockout that the equipment is going to be shut down and that they will need to participate in lockout activities. Once all personnel are notified and aware of the lockout, the specific energy control procedure involved must be reviewed. This procedure is unique for every piece of equipment and is a step-by-step guide on how to lock out the piece of equipment being worked on. The lockout, tagout, tryout procedure will also help identify all energy sources involved. Common energy sources include electric, hydraulic, pneumatic, and gravity. The next step is to shut down the equipment. Once it is confirmed that the equipment is shut down, disconnect the power or isolate the equipment from its primary energy source by positioning the energy isolating device in the safe or off position. Examples include pulling electrical disconnects, closing valves on pneumatic, hydraulic, or chemical process lines, or installing blanks. It is important to note that electrical disconnects must never be pulled while equipment is still operational due to the potential for a dangerous arc flash event to occur. In addition, electrical disconnects should only be pulled while standing off to the side with your head turned away while wearing the appropriate PPE. With the energy isolating devices in the safe or off position, locks are then placed on the energy isolating devices so they cannot be removed or activated. The next step involves identifying and neutralizing all potential or stored energy. This includes bleeding stored pressure from cylinders or process lines, venting air or steam pressure, and blocking or securing parts that can move or lowering suspended parts. Finally, the last step involved in the lockout, tagout, tryout process is to test the equipment, or simply put, try it out, or verify through other testing or metering that the energy source is isolated. This is necessary to verify that the equipment is in a zero energy state and will not operate or turn on when the controls are activated. When a task cannot be performed in a de-energized state, work on energized equipment is limited to testing and troubleshooting by qualified personnel and appropriate PPE. Insulating and shielding materials and insulated tools must be used. Recently, a crane technician was installing anti-collision devices on 2 cranes which required him to have the cranes energized so he could bring them together to set the anti-collision devices. However, he did not have any of the temporary crane rail stops in place, nor a spotter present. He believed he was moving one crane, when in reality he was moving the second crane. This crane struck an elevated man lift, knocking it to the ground and stranding the technician on a crane bridge. During this work, locking out the cranes was not feasible due to the adjustments and troubleshooting that needed to take place. Fully locking out a piece of equipment should always be the first choice. But when recognizing that is not always possible, the person performing the work must take proper precautions, ensuring that all possible guards are in place and only conduct diagnostic activities. Once the diagnostic activities are complete and the problem is found, proper lockout must be performed before beginning repair work. Is this employee following proper lockout tryout procedures? This employee did not try out or verify that the equipment is in a zero-energy state prior to starting work. Tryout will indicate if any errors were made during the lockout process. This very important final step of the lockout process must never be skipped.
Make sure your employees have equipment locked out and tagged out when they make that transition from troubleshooting and investigating to actually repairing the equipment. Once they go to repairs and replace component parts, they need to lock out and tag out.
One thing that we've got to make sure we do before we work on any piece of equipment is that we've got it secured properly. Lockout tagout is a very important part of our safety program. Before I or any of my coworkers are going to go and put our hands in or on a piece of equipment that has a power source for it, could be energized, we've got to make sure we've got that energy source contained and under the control of the person who's actually going to have their hands or their body in harm's way if it were to be activated.
Out here we perform lockout, tagout, tryout. When we're going to work on a piece of equipment, we kill the power sources to it, we put our locks on it, we have identifying tags with our names on the locks, and then when we take one extra step, we try it out. We try the piece of equipment out to ensure that we have everything, all the power sources locked out, that we have the correct equipment locked out, and that's just to keep everyone safe. If a piece of equipment was to start up while we were performing a task, it could be a loss of a limb, it could be loss of a life.
Lockout is one of the primary defenses that we have against injury, against accidents. Lockout is intended to keep you safe when you knowingly put yourself in a potentially dangerous situation. By locking equipment out, we remove the energy, the potential for that injury to occur. So that's just one of the most basic things we have to do, one of the most important steps that we can take toward working safely.
Now that we know the steps involved in executing proper lockout, tagout, tryout, we will now discuss the difference between an individual lockout and a group lockout. An individual lockout is performed when only one authorized employee is performing the servicing or maintenance. In this situation, the individual working on the equipment will place the one energy isolating device in the safe or off position and simply apply their personal lockout lock to the energy isolating device. A group lockout is performed whenever the servicing or maintenance is performed by a group of employees. In a group lockout situation, the employer must develop and implement an energy control procedure that provides each employee with the same level of protection. Therefore, this situation is often more complex than servicing or maintenance performed by an individual. As a result, group lockout or tagout operations typically require more coordination and communication, which is particularly important when more than one craft or department is involved to complete the task. A single authorized employee must assume the overall responsibility for all members of the group while servicing or maintenance work is in progress. The authorized employee must implement the energy control procedures, communicate the purpose, coordinate the operation, and ensure that all procedural steps have been properly completed. Once all energy sources have been identified and properly locked out per the energy control procedures, the authorized employee places the keys to the lockout devices in a lockbox. The employees performing the servicing or maintenance work must then affix their personal locks to the lockbox. This enables the employees to ensure their protection and inform others that employees are working on the equipment. As long as personal locks remain attached, the authorized employee in charge of the group lockout knows that the work has not been completed and that it is not safe to re-energize the equipment. The authorized employee must only re-energize the equipment when all personal locks have been removed from the lockbox, indicating that employees are no longer exposed to the hazards from servicing or performing maintenance on the operation. Remember to always place your lock on the energy isolating device and never work under the protection of someone else's lock. Lockout locks must be singularly identified, indicating the identity of the employee applying the lock. They also must be standardized in color, shape, or size, and must not be used for any other purposes. Only you can apply or remove your personal lockout lock, and the key must be in your control at all times when applied. If you are not available to remove your lock, your company must verify your absence by making all reasonable efforts to contact you before your lock can be removed by any other individual. Can you identify the problem in this scene? There are 2 workers working on this equipment, but only one lock is placed on the lockbox. Never work under the protection of another person's lock, or in any situation without your personal lockout lock applied.
If we have multiple things to lock out, we have a lockout board. The lockout board, it has pictures and has instructions on the different things that need to be locked out, whether it's a disconnect or a valve or whatever it may be. You can go and you can reference it. You just make sure, just like if you lock one thing out or lock 10 things out, you just make sure all the energy's gone.
In some cases, we do have equipment that's got more than one type of energy that powers it, or that can power it. And those are the cases where we've got to be super critical, make sure we follow the lockout procedure that we've got to verify that we have isolated all of the power sources, whether it's electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic, even gravity. Make sure we've got everything contained and isolated in such a way that all of the power sources are de-energized before we go in and start work.
Several years ago, a fatality occurred while restarting a preheat furnace after all employees had removed their personal locks from the lockbox. As an employee was leaving the work site, he noticed part of the refractory was not installed correctly. Even though his lock was removed from the lockbox, he went into the furnace to get a closer look. The employee entered the furnace and the door was activated. When this occurred, the employee was crushed by the door, resulting in fatal injuries. What could have been done differently in this situation to prevent this horrific incident? Prior to restarting the furnace after work had been completed and all locks have been removed, all employees in the area must be alerted that startup is about to take place. Never resume work after you remove your personal lockout lock. Communication is extremely important and, at a minimum, must take place at the beginning and at the end of every lockout, tagout, tryout situation. It is critical to assuring that all lockout situations are conducted without incident. In addition, energy control procedures must be reviewed annually to ensure that they are accurate and effective at isolating hazardous sources of energy. Any changes to the energy control procedures must be communicated, and authorized employees should be audited by another authorized employee when performing lockout, tagout, tryout to ensure that the procedures are being followed properly and that no deficiencies exist.
When all maintenance is completed, we make sure that all the tools are removed, all cards are replaced. and all affected workers are made aware of the restarting of the equipment.
After placing the guards back on the equipment, we'll notify the affected personnel, and after verifying the machine's good to go, we'll pick up our tools and go on to the next job.
Anytime we are working on a piece of equipment, at some point obviously we finish the job, and there's yet another important part of the safety program is the communication and double check that everybody is out of harm's way before we start the equipment back up and get production going again. It's a responsibility of the man doing the job to not take his lock off and to keep the equipment isolated and under his control until he is completely out of harm's way, and then he's got to communicate with the operator who would restart the equipment that he is out of harm's way, and then there's always got to be that communication and double check from the operator back to the people who've been working on the equipment that they are in fact 100% out of the way and ready to go before we start the equipment back up.
Unfortunately, errors made in the lockout process were among the leading causes of industrial fatalities last year. Although following proper lockout procedures can be complex and timely, the potential for severe and even fatal injuries justifies the extra time and effort to assure it is completed properly. Remember, when lockout, tagout, tryout procedures are executed correctly, all lockout-related injuries can be prevented. Please make sure to complete the lockout, tagout, tryout steps outlined in this training each and every time your job functions will require you to perform servicing or maintenance on equipment and machinery. Remember, one lock, one key, one life.